Hello everyone, welcome to another Blu-ray DVD or DVD Blu-ray collection update video. So today's just going to be a bunch of random stuff. It's just going to be a bunch of random stuff today. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, we have Ever After. So if you know anything about the Cinderella story, then you pretty much would assume that it's basically a Disney thing. But no, actually, it was based on the Grimm fairy tale, which Disney basically turned into like one of the biggest animated films of all time. But what a lot of people don't know is that there actually are a lot of different adaptations of the Cinderella story. There's a lot of different ones. And this is by far one of the best of them. And I know it sounds really cliche, like, Mark, why would you say that about Cinderella? I'm not. It's good. The original Cinderella is a classic, always will be. But I also liked the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, the one from 1965. But if I had to pick one that would top that, it would be this. Why? Well, first off, it's very different. It's a very different interpretation of a Cinderella story. First off, there are no mice characters. There's not even a fairy godmother. Instead, what we have here is a very complex kind of narrative structure, whereas Cinderella is not called Cinderella. Her name is Danielle in this one. And the stepmother, basically, she's not really related to them necessarily. We do actually get to find out who Cinderella's dad was, or should I say Danielle's father was. And I don't know. It's interesting because the writing is smart, but it doesn't need to rely heavily on the original story to tell its story. The characterization is pretty interesting. Danielle actually, she's not just the woman victim of doing labor for her sisters. No, instead, she does that, but she also has a backbone. She also has a backbone in many areas. So there's like many elements where she actually stands up for herself. And not just stand up for herself, but she also fights too. And not to mention the woman playing the stepmother, Angelica Houston, I think she's on par with the Disney one in that she has this diabolical sense of like, she knows what she's doing, yet she does it in a very kind of gleeful kind of way. It's hard to explain. But I think what makes it work ultimately is that the writing is interesting. There's plenty of the romantic elements from the original story that you would expect. Yet there's also more depth to Danielle and the stepmother. There's action scenes in it, so if you don't like all that quote-unquote girly stuff, then you'll like the action scenes in this. The action scenes in here are actually pretty good. Like, there are action moments. There's a bit of everything in this one. There's, the romantic aspect from the original story, but there's also action scenes, great character development, great characterization, the good portrayals of Danielle and the stepmother. But at the same time, it's not like, it's really good. It's a good Cinderella type film. It's not what you'd expect. If you see a Nostalgia Critic review on old versus new Cinderella, it's funny, spoiler alert, they actually mentioned that film as like the best Cinderella movie. I kind of think it's a tie between the original Disney one and this one. Next up, we have 8 Mile. Now, this is the Eminem movie. The story of a rapper who's trying to make his mark on the rapping world, but he also has his own inner demons going on and his own personal troubles that he needs to sort out. Now, this, I guess you could say this is part semi-autobiographical because of the fact that, it's basically Eminem being, portraying a fictionalized version of himself. Him trying to climb up the rapping ladder in a sense. And, he's also trying to find out who he is as a person and as an artist. But he also has all these personal issues that he's dealing with, but it works. It does click. Brittany Murphy's in here. Who else? Kim Basinger. And yeah, of course, it has that Oscar-winning song, Lose Yourself, which is a really great song, by the way. But yeah, great drama. kind of interesting in parts. Speaking of good dramas, we have Wild with Reese Witherspoon. This is the true story of Cyril Shepherd, who she left her husband and she left the pain of her childhood with her mom, and she just went on this hiking trip, and that's it. But during that time, as she finds herself, she tries to explore something about herself as she never really knew before. So, of course, you got great performances by Reese Witherspoon and Laura Dern. But also, it's kind of interesting. This was based on the memoir Sybil Shepherd wrote. Cheryl Shepherd. It's a film that does click. Not to mention, it's kind of a pretty good story. There's these flashback sequences. They actually do work for the movie. And I just don't have much to say on it. It's actually a pretty decent film. Oh, and not to mention, this was directed by the same guy who brought us Dallas Buyers Club. Another really good movie. Though I like Dallas Buyers Club a little better. Next up, we have Tommy Boy from 1995. Chris Farley, man. I've never gotten into him. I never got into him. Even when he was on SNL, I never really understood what made him so funny. I just didn't, John Candy was interesting because he could actually play different types of roles instead of comedic ones. You would see him as in The Great Outdoors and Uncle Buck, and then another minute you would see him being dramatic, like in Cool Running or Cool Runnings or something along those lines. He could do like different types of things, but Chris Farley only does comedy, and it's the only thing he did, and I just never got into him. Although this movie's great because it does, David Spade balances it out. His humor may not be that great, at least to me personally, but David Spade's writing is hilarious. The plot of the movie is nothing to really write home about either, because it's basically Chris Farley plays the son of he's like a salesman. Yeah, he's like a salesman. But then the dad croaks, and now he has to take on the leadership role, something he's never done before. Yeah, it's very basic in terms of plot, but hey, you know what? It's not bad. It's not bad. It was okay. Actually, there were some parts of this movie that are really funny. But again, that's mostly coming from David Spade. That's not coming from Chris Farley at all. Respect. This is the Aretha Franklin movie. Jennifer Hudson does a really great job at portraying Aretha Franklin, but I also really like Cynthia Erivo from the Genius series. But again, this movie being like the same length as the Elvis movie, I think my real problem is that while the Elvis movie did a decent attempt at showcasing Elvis's lifetimes and career and stuff like that, Respect only goes to like, I think 1972, something like that, when she was performing at this church. That was like the only time that I guess that, I don't know. It was just missing stuff. They sort of glanced over the fact that she got pregnant by the time that she was only around 12 or 13. They sort of glanced over the abuse at the hands of her father, a well-known preacher. And by the way, he's played by Forrest Whitaker in this, and he does a good job. And, it sort of glances over some details. But Genius Show was way more thorough. It was way more thorough. It was way more detailed. And it sucks, but that doesn't have a physical release, because I would have bought that. But yeah, I liked that better than this. But again, not bad. Yes. Babe, let me tell you something. This movie, okay. I remember watching this as a kid several times in my life. I remember watching this a lot, actually. There's this pig. Do I even need to explain it? We all know Babe, man. We all know Babe. This is a classic. But I grew up with this. I used to have it on VHS. I don't know what happened to it, but basically, Babe tells the story of this pig who ends up becoming a sheepdog. That's what I remember. It won the Oscar for visual effects. Yeah, it's got the guy James Cromwell. That's his name. Every time I see James Cromwell, I always think he's the guy from Babe. This is one of the best family films out there. And I would recommend this to any family. I don't care who it is. For all the movies that involved animals, dogs, cats, horses, or whatever, for all the movies in which they talked, this was like the precursor to that, and it was done billion times better. Like, way, way better. All those family stuff with like cats and dogs and show dogs and Racing Stripes, if any of you remember that. Yeah, those are not like... You know what I just realized? I hadn't thought of Racing Stripes in like forever, and all of a sudden that name just came up. But Babe is a classic. It's actually one of the movies that I grew up with as a kid. But again, it's good the way it is. It doesn't need anything more. Actually, there is a sequel called Babe Pig in the City, which I've never seen. Next up, we have one that you may like this, you might not. THX 1138 from 1970. Now, this movie is interesting because this is the first film directed by George Lucas. Yep, the Star Wars man himself, George Lucas. After he graduated from the college he went to with Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Francis Ford Coppola. Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas decided to make a film together. It was essentially an expanded version of a film he made in college called Electronic Labyrinth THX 1138. Shortened here to just THX 1138. The plot of the film is relatively simple. It takes place in a dystopian future where emotions and feelings are controlled. They're essentially controlled by a society. So you're essentially asked to, answer to this, this AI type therapist in a way, saying the same phrases over and over. And your emotions are controlled. Your feelings are controlled. Even sex is forbidden. And so Robert Duvall's character, he's trying to get out. You would not have had Star Wars without THX 1138. And the thing is that it works. It is good. I'm surprised. I was actually very surprised at this movie because I didn't think it would be that great, given the fact that this was before Star Wars. But no, somehow Lucas managed to make it work. And actually, he took this movie back. When it was released in 1970, Warner Brothers cut the movie without his consent. They removed some of the themes from the movie, like sex is controlled. They removed that theme entirely. They removed that theme and they released it, and it didn't really make that big of a splash. So that's what prompted Lucas to create his own studio, Lucasfilm Limited, and that's how we got American Graffiti and, of course, Star Wars. Sometime around the early 2000s, he was able to take his movie back from the studio, essentially release it on his terms, restoring the lost scenes and creating a few touches here and there. Which, by the way, the digital touches in this movie are so minuscule, you wouldn't even know where they are. And actually, there is no way to watch the original version. There is no way. You cannot find it anywhere. So the fact that George Lucas released the director's cut is actually a good thing in this case because, well, the studio basically took it away from him. The Diary of Anne Frank from 1959. Now, I remember reading the diary. Her father, Otto, after he was the only member of his family to survive the concentration camps, he actually published her diary. And that got turned into a play, which became a movie. If you know the story, then there really isn't much to say, but basically, Anne Frank had to hide in the upstairs attic, like right behind a bookshelf, in order to avoid getting captured by the Nazis and put in the concentration camps, which that only went so far. If you know how it ends, then I guess there's nothing more to say, but the acting in this movie is great across the board. Millie Perkins, Ed Wynn is in here in his only dramatic turn and the only Oscar nomination of his career. I'm blanking on who else. Joseph Schindlerkart from The Life of Emile Zola. Shelley Winters, who won the Oscar for this. Richard Beamer from West Side Story is in here. Diane Baker's in here. It's really superbly directed by George Stevens, and honestly, it's really touching. It's decently accurate, at least according to the diary, it's accurate. But Yeah, this is really good. Next up, we have a Downton Abbey movie. Now, I am a huge fan of the show Downton Abbey. I'm a huge fan of that show. That is like one of the best shows of all time. Like, I love that show. I know the characters by heart. I love it. So when I heard about the movie, and by the way, I forgot to mention, the ending was great. The Irish guy, he got to go back to his home country. You know, everybody's where they need to be by the end of the show. And yeah, it's a great finale. But the movie, I was kind of surprised by, because I didn't think they would make a movie, let alone two. But the first film, I say give it a watch. So the king and queen are going to visit Downton while simultaneously there's an assassination plot going on. Yeah, that's as far as I remember. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. But it's funny. I don't want a third movie. I don't want a third movie. I don't need a third movie. I am good. I don't need any more. Okay, so please don't give us a third movie. Especially after that crap you pulled at the end of the last one. You just ruined any chance of there being another movie. I'm sorry. Then next up, we have City Slickers. City Slickers is kind of an interesting movie. Not one of the best, not that perfect or anything, but it was fine for what it was. It was fine. The plot involves Billy Crystal going through some kind of a midlife crisis. So one of his friends suggested that they go this Western rodeo kind of journey. Along the way, they meet Jack Palance, who won the Oscar for this, and they sort of learn something about themselves. Yeah, it's a decent movie. I'm not going to say it's like fantastic or anything, but I think it's a pretty decent comedy. Yes, it's a comedy. I didn't find it that funny, but I found more heart in it than humor. And yeah, now this is funny. Office Space. Okay, in sometime around the late 90s, there were all these movies that were called cubicle movies. Basically, men who were basically stuck in offices, who don't like their job, who they want something else out of life. And there were films like this one, Fight Club, American Beauty. There were several of these, but this is easily one of the best of them. American Beauty is another good one too. But anyway, it basically is nothing more than it just follows these people who are in this office building, and they are constantly bullied by not bullied, but they don't like their job. So you ask, why are they even there in the first place? You know, you wonder why are they there. And it's funny. This is one guy who has the same name as a well-known singer. I'm not going to spoil it, but he has one of the funniest lines in the movie. And the boss is hilarious. He's like, if you can work on the weekends, that'd be great. Daniel Stern. Daniel Stern? Crap, I'm blanking on the name, man. Anyway, but the guy's hilarious. He's really funny. He's a jerk. He's a douche, but he's hilarious. I honestly really thought this movie was funny. And again, I didn't really know what I was expecting. There's also this one guy who he doesn't never can get anything up as he can. He can't even speak. He can't even get any words out because everybody's talking over him. And but yeah, this movie's just really funny. It's a really funny movie. Absolutely great. Carlito's Way. This was the successor to the Brian De Palma Scarface. And man, let me tell you, it works. I don't want to give it away, but basically, there's this Al Pacino plays this former crime boss who he wants to drift away from crime, but he gets pulled back into it. And, those old habits start coming back. This is a 2.5-hour ride, but really, it's kind of an interesting character study. Like, the Brian De Palma Scarface, yes, I say Brian De Palma Scarface because there was an original Scarface with Paul Muni that a lot of people don't talk about anymore. That movie was a great character study, too, about somebody who's coming to America, and he turns to not only wife a crime, but also he's very proud of who he is. Well, this one is really more of the opposite, where, he wants to change, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, he's not able to. So he's kind of roped back into it, in a sense, and it doesn't help that Sean Penn is his attorney, who he's kind of I don't want to give his character away, but basically, yeah, it's Really interesting, actually. It's good. It's a good character study on, a character who wants to change, but for whatever reason he's not able to. So yeah, it does work. It clicks. Next up we have Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian was probably one of the best fantasy films to come out of the 80s. 1982 saw Arnold Schwarzenegger as a character whose father is killed by James Earl Jones, and now he has to don the sword that his father told him about, and so he has to essentially become the leader of sorts. And so, but at the same time, he's also out for revenge against the death of his father. But at the same time, he's trying to understand what the power of a sword actually means. This is great. The first Conan the Barbarian is absolutely fantastic. It's got great action scenes. Great. This was one of the many sword and sorcery type movies that came out a lot during that time. So yes, Conan the Barbarian is really well done. Actually, what's interesting is that it doesn't go the way you'd expect. Like, you think it's going to become this, but it ends up becoming that, and then it turns on you all the time. But it plays out much like one of those RPG role playing books kind of thing. It's like where it's sort of told as if it's from coming out of a storybook or something. It's kind of interesting, actually. But it takes itself seriously, and it does a really great job. Conan the Destroyer, on the other hand, I don't remember what the plot was. I don't remember what the plot was. What I do remember is that it wasn't as good. Actually, there is a reason for it. The first movie was geared toward more an adult audience, while the second movie was geared toward everybody. That's a problem. If you've seen Expendables 3, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a reason why that doesn't work. You tone the movie down to suit a more wider audience. It can't work. Come on, it cannot work. So there's a reason why the second one didn't work, but I'm not going to say it's not watchable. I found enjoyment in the second film, even though it's horribly problematic. But again, go watch the first Conan the Barbarian. It's great. Actually, I did see the Jason Momoa one that came out in 2011. It was okay. Not great. It was just alright. A Time to Kill. Now, somebody actually recommended this movie to me. Somebody I know actually recommended it to me. And I watched it, and yeah, it was really good. Actually, this was brand new. When I bought this, it was actually brand new, sealed. So, that was actually really nice. So, but this is a fantastic movie. Dealing with racial tensions in the South. Samuel L. Jackson's character is just a simple guy living on the simple, rundown house with his family, but then he's tried for murder. Matthew McConaughey, Kevin Spacey, Sandra Bullock. Probably my one of the better performances by her. And yes, it's directed by Joel Schumacher, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I'm not the biggest fan of his movies, but if I had to pick which Joel Schumacher movies I liked, The Lost Boys and this one. I think there's one other one, but I don't really know. But yeah, this is a very interesting film, very heavy on theme, and it really does click. I also saw Mississippi Burning. Mississippi Burning is another movie that deals with racial tensions and prejudice and racism in the South. But that movie was more about a historical, true case. This one, I don't know. I don't know if it was, actually. I don't know if it was. Somebody could correct me on that. But, alright, one more movie, and then we're going to call it a night. War Games from 1983. War Games is a really good movie, a really good thriller, too. The plot involves Matthew Broderick as this, computer nerd who he tapped into this computer program where it's like, now we play a game. And he thinks that it's just a game, but what he doesn't realize is that he accidentally tapped into the military's missile launch system. Yeah. This is a really interesting thriller that basically asks a lot of like questions of like what's the difference between a game and reality kind of thing. So it's like a race against the clock, and it really works. It's a really interesting, clever thriller that doesn't pull any punches, but it starts out as innocent in the beginning, and then it kind of like slowly descends into like, oh my god, we need to end this, you know. And I think at one point where he actually asked the question like, is this a game or is it real? Um, you'll be amazed at what you find. You'll be amazed at you'll be amazed by that movie actually. So check that out. And that's all for today. Until next time, I will see all of you later.